Hey everyone, my name is Alex Corbett, and today I'll be talking about role-playing beyond the analog and digital binary, hybridizing literacies and play amid physical distancing mandates. I'll start with a quick vignette from a woman named Morgan, who I speak with every week. She says, when my oldest was in grade school, all she ever wanted to draw were dragons, baby dragons, fierce dragons, all sorts of dragons. My husband and I wanted to broaden her love for the arts, but we were so nervous that we might snuff out her passion. So I began asking her, where do these dragons live? What is their community like? What do they do? And suddenly a whole world opened up. This is Morgan's daughter now and her company that she runs. And kind of metaphorically, I ask, can you see the dragon in these pictures? Morgan is also the founder of my research site, a nonprofit organization that I call EdQuest, and Morgan calls it a place to feed your dragon. EdQuest has been through multiple iterations and phases, starting as a fencing school, eventually becoming a live action role play site where youth come together with like foam swords and costuming, and it's like an embodied version of Dungeons and Dragons. And since the pandemic, it has become kind of a hybrid space that uses STEM for LARPing. For this project, I pull on a breadth of new literacies scholarship, specifically a lot of work from Dr. Antero Garcia and Dr. James G, thinking about the various discourses and ontologies of gaming and play. A quick data excerpt from the site occurred when we have a scenario in which participants are fighting a group of goblins and you have the staff dressed up as goblins, mediated through mechanics of the screen, but then also there is a material element where participants are throwing paper balls at little targets that they create, and it becomes this assemblage of materials, modalities, and identities. And I try to think and trace across these spaces. Why does LARPing matter? Well, in part because the worlds we create and the worlds we live in, there is a frail boundary between the two. This is an example of a learning experience that I'm facilitating with youth right now, which is fantastic. However, the themes of fracking and deforestation and pollution very closely tie to the way we mobilize environmental activism in the real world. We also see this in our politics, right? Um, Again and again, conservative affinity spaces like QAnon and things like that use and mobilize the language of LARPing very often, and sometimes the boundary between um, these kind of alternate reality spaces online actually very much manifest in real ways in our political spaces. So that's just a quick introduction to my thinking and paper and research, and I look forward to talking with you all today.
Hi, everyone. We're Christian and Emily from McGill in Montreal, and we're going to give you a brief overview of our paper that theorizes literacy collectives through teens' narrative-based video gameplay.
Our theorization of literacy collectives comes from the Games Are Lit After School Club for teens in an urban youth center. Our paper asks, how do teens and Games Are Lit develop a sense of collectivity through shared experiences of meaning making with new media texts? And how do their literacy collectives develop critical activist sensibilities through these shared experiences? Our paper contributes to the development of affect theory for literacy studies that understands how instances of collective critical meaning making exceed language and fixed representations. We develop a theory of literacy as a social, cultural, and affective phenomenon that emerges through the relations of human and other organic and non-organic bodies, together affecting the production of sensible signs. Sensible signs include those that are rationally interpretable, as well as those that are processed unconsciously, vitally, as Bolt theorizes, signs that send us searching. Through this perspective, we theorize literacy collectives as literacy events through which there is a sense that group members are affectively attuned to each other in response to and production of sensible signs. This affective attunement across bodies' experiences of literacy is sometimes related to the stirring of political action and critical meaning making, such as the example that Emily will describe.
The club, composed that day of Cam, 15, Ali, 13, Luca, esports coach, Christian, and myself, sat huddled on closely positioned chairs, becoming increasingly immersed in gameplay. The once lighthearted atmosphere permeating the space was abruptly replaced by a thick, heavy air when we arrived at a dark moment in gameplay. With no words uttered, effectively attuned bodies produced sensible signs of anger and frustration while watching our adolescent avatar unfairly punished for protecting a young woman. Almost instinctively, we exchanged looks of mutual unease, and Cam loudly explained, "This part is BS." This moment in the game stirred us, moved us unexpectedly toward discussions of institutional corruption, as our experience of a literacy collective, deepened by vitality, was propelled toward the critical and activist, leaving gameplay behind.
A traditional perspective on this scene would focus on language, creating a specific teleology of meaning making in relation to affect. It would force the question, what does the meaning of a text make you feel? We approach the question differently through affect theory, asking, if you feel something, what does that mean? What can you do with that feeling? Where can feelings carry a collective over time? Through this perspective, we wonder alongside literacy researchers in the field, how might loosening our focus on language and fixed representations as the primary drivers of literacy events help us understand how literacy collectives cohere and move together toward impassioned action? Thank you.
Hello, we are presenting our paper, Listening for Effective Resonances in an ACA Fandom Classroom. I'm Karis Jones.
And I'm Scott Storm.
And we're here from New York University. In this paper, we are looking particularly at effective resonances, a concept that looks for moments when feelings are amplified as people, resources, and flows of emotion intersect in relationships such that there is a vibration and resonation of a natural frequency. We are particularly interested in tracing ways participants actively extended passionate fandom intensities.
Thus, our research question was, how did BIPOC youth cultivate effective resonances as they pursued their fandom passions and meaning making in this ACA fandom space designed to support such practices? And what barriers interrupted these resonances? The space that we are talking about is my high school English classroom, which is an unscreened, untracked high school class serving a diverse student body in a large Northeast city. The class was diverse racially, socioeconomically, and by special education status. Our focal participants for this study all identified as people of color, and half of the focal students received special education services.
In this class, youth were invited to bring in texts that they felt passionate about, and Grey's Anatomy emerged in our focal group as an important text for study. In this class, we found that affect was sustained by centering texts and discourses that BIPOC youth knew well and felt passionate about, supporting a respectful back and forth between fans and potential fans, and a tacit consensus not to engage with self-dampening practices of certain white students. We found that when white students were derisive toward Grey's Anatomy and calling it unprofessional or not a great show, that dampened the way that youth were able to engage in affective practices together in our class.
So the implications for this work are that teachers should not consider only what texts are brought into the classroom, but also teachers need to consider how social and cultural hierarchies of taste may shape students' interactions with these texts, neither contribute to a dampening or an effective resonance.
Thank you for listening, and we're looking forward to talking with you.
We are English teacher educators interested in fandom literacies, the fan fiction and fan art, those compositions that allow writers to playfully engage with characters and situations in various media. These literacies also support practices valued in ELA classrooms, including close reading, textual analysis, peer review, and response to literature.
So thinking about this, we together taught a week-long graduate course that had teachers exploring fandoms and the online spaces and practices surrounding them. We facilitated their experiences as creators and their interrogation of the pedagogical and disciplinary connections, or sometimes not, between fandoms and classrooms. Teachers chose a text and read, wrote, and commented on its fanfiction. They reflected on research about fan-based literacies, and finally, they wrote unit plans that incorporated fandom practices into their ELA instruction. Our collective case study followed 4 of the teachers through the last academic year to answer these research questions. In this presentation, we're going to focus on Melanie because her experience speaks best to how teachers walked the line between resonances and dissonances with traditional literacy curriculum. So, in working with these living texts of canonical literature and fan-based writing, Melanie brought play in from the margins of ELA curriculum by encouraging students who are reading Catcher in the Rye to question the text and characters, speculate on the rest of the story between the scenes by writing narratively, and finally, to write analytically from that speculation.
Melanie attempts pedagogies of multiliteracies, exploring the resonances and dissonances between fandom literacies and ELA valued literacies. With her students, she built new curricular patterns to transform student opportunities for meaning making and criticality. Discussing the history and practices of fandoms appears to have encouraged Melanie and other teachers to work towards transforming their curricula in playful ways.